The arena was loud, but not in celebration. It was that uneasy kind of noise, the kind you hear when everyone knows something big is about to happen, but no one knows how it will end. The scoreboard didn't lie, the clock didn't care, and the Toronto Raptors weren't backing down. This wasn't a playoff game, no confetti, no banners at stake. But sometimes regular season moments tell you more about a player than any postseason run ever could, because pressure doesn't announce itself. It just shows up and waits to see who blinks first. Derrick Rose had the ball in his hands late, again. And here's what most people forget, or maybe never noticed at all. At this point in his career, Rose was still being debated, still being questioned, still being labeled as talented but young, fast but unproven, exciting but not clutch yet. That night in March 2011, the Raptors didn't fear him. They should have, because with every second that came off the clock, Derrick Rose wasn't rushing, he wasn't forcing, he wasn't looking to pass the responsibility to someone else. He was watching, measuring, letting the moment breathe, and the defense felt it. Toronto tightened up, hands out, feet shuffling. Everyone focused on one man, because everyone knew the Bulls weren't running anything complicated. No misdirection, no decoy. This was going to be simple. Give Rose the ball, live with the result. What made this moment dangerous wasn't the score, it was Rose's body language. Calm, almost quiet. No arguing with refs, no dramatic gestures, just that familiar look Bulls fans had started to recognize, the one that said he already knew how this possession was ending. But here's the part people argue about to this day. Should the Raptors have doubled him earlier? Should they have forced the ball out of his hands? Was it bad defense or inevitable offense? That's the question I want you to answer in the comments. Because when the clock dipped lower and the space around Rose tightened, something became clear. This wasn't about speed anymore. This wasn't about athleticism. This was about belief. And belief is what separates great players from moments that fade. Rose took his time crossing half court. Every bounce of the ball felt heavier than the last. Teammates spaced out, watching. The crowd rose slightly, sensing what was coming. The Raptors matched up, ready for the drive. But Derrick Rose wasn't thinking about driving. He was thinking about ending it. And when the final seconds arrived, when there was no room left for error, no margin for adjustment, no chance for a second decision, Rose made the only move that mattered. He rose. Not rushed, not panicked, not guessing, just confident. The shot left his hand as the buzzer screamed for attention, and in that fraction of a second, everything about Derrick Rose's reputation was hanging in the air with that basketball. This was the moment that would tell everyone who he really was. And what happened next changed how teams defended him forever.
The ball was still in the air when the sound hit first. Not cheers, not boos. That sharp, collective inhale. The one that happens when an arena realizes it's already too late to change anything. The buzzer screamed, the red lights flashed, and then the net snapped. Clean. No rim, no debate, no second look. For a split second, Toronto stood frozen, like they were waiting for a whistle that never came. The Raptors' bench didn't jump. The defenders didn't argue. They just turned their heads and looked back at the clock, hoping it would somehow disagree with what they'd just seen. It didn't. Derrick Rose didn't celebrate right away. That's what made it colder. He didn't jump into anyone's arms, didn't pound his chest, didn't stare down the defender. He just turned and jogged back, like this was something he expected to happen. That detail matters. Because clutch isn't just about making shots, it's about how normal the moment feels to the person taking it. And for Rose, this didn't feel like a miracle. It felt like confirmation. The Raptors had done what many teams tried to do that season. They stayed home on shooters, trusted their defender, and dared Rose to take the final shot instead of attacking the rim. On paper, it made sense. He was known for explosiveness, not jumpers, speed, not patience, chaos, not control. But that idea was already outdated. What people didn't fully appreciate yet was how much Rose's game had evolved. The pull-up jumper wasn't a bailout anymore. It was a weapon. And in moments like this, it was the perfect weapon, because it didn't rely on contact or help calls or anyone else doing their job. It relied on one thing: nerves. And Toronto just learned whose nerves broke first. As the Bulls' bench exploded behind him, Rose finally cracked a smile. Not wide, not dramatic, just enough to say, "Yeah, I know." Teammates mobbed him, coaches slapped his back, the crowd roared now, late but loud, realizing they had just witnessed something that would be replayed far longer than the game itself. This wasn't a highlight, it was a message. Because this shot didn't happen in isolation, it was part of a pattern forming quietly across the league. Late-game situations were starting to look the same against Chicago. Everyone knew who was taking the shot, everyone prepared for it, and somehow it kept working. That's when defenses start to panic. Not because they don't know what's coming, but because knowing doesn't help. The Raptors would later say the coverage was correct, the angle was right, the contest was there, and they weren't wrong. But basketball doesn't care about correctness, it cares about results. And the result was simple. Derrick Rose had taken another close game and decided it himself. No screen saving him, no mismatch hunting, no bailout call. Just him, the clock, and the confidence to live with the outcome. That's when the conversation around Rose began to shift, slowly, quietly, but permanently. Analysts stopped calling him promising, coaches stopped saying if he develops, opponents stopped smiling late in games. Because moments like this don't just win games, they build reputations. And reputations change how the league treats you.
The scary part wasn't that Derrick Rose made the shot. It was how early this started happening in his career. Most players need years before the league trusts them in those moments. Years before coaches stop drawing decoy plays. Years before teammates instinctively clear out without being told. But with Rose, that transition happened quietly, almost accidentally, because situations kept forcing the truth out. Late clock, tight score, everyone watching. And there he was again. By March 2011, this wasn't a surprise anymore inside NBA locker rooms. Players talked, assistants whispered, scouting reports changed tone. They stopped saying make him shoot and started saying don't let him get comfortable. But comfort had nothing to do with it. Rose wasn't calm because the moment was easy. He was calm because the pressure felt familiar. He had lived inside it long before the NBA ever gave him a platform. Southside gyms, high-stakes AAU games, empty courts late at night where missing meant staying longer. This was repetition meeting opportunity. And the Raptors game just happened to be another receipt. What fans didn't see was what followed, not on the scoreboard, but in the way Chicago began operating after moments like this. The Bulls didn't hope Rose would save them late, they expected it. That expectation changed the geometry of the floor. Shooters spaced wider, bigs rolled harder, defenders hesitated just enough to open lanes that didn't exist on paper. Clutch isn't loud when it's real, it's structural. Opponents felt it too. You could see it in their body language during timeouts. Defenders leaned forward a little more. Help came a half step earlier than planned. Guys stopped reaching because they didn't want to be the one sent to the replay. That hesitation, that's power. And Rose earned it not by talking, but by repeatedly accepting the responsibility others avoided. The Raptors' possession before the buzzer beater mattered as well. They scored, they celebrated, they thought they had done enough. That belief, even for a second, is dangerous when you're facing someone who doesn't need chaos to operate.
Rose didn't rush the inbound, didn't sprint blindly, didn't look for a whistle. He read the floor like a veteran who had been there 100 times, even though he hadn't. That's when teammates start believing something bigger is happening. Not superstition, not hype, belief. Belief that no lead is safe for the other team. Belief that one possession is all it takes. Belief that even when the play breaks down, the night doesn't. Those beliefs don't show up in box scores, but they show up in win totals. And Chicago's rise that season wasn't just about defense or depth, it was about identity. And identity needs moments to solidify. This was one of them. Because clutch moments don't age equally. Some highlights fade, some shots get lost between playoff runs and bigger stages, but the ones that matter most are the ones that change how a player is treated afterward. After this, Rose wasn't just the explosive guard anymore. He was the closer, the answer, the last option you couldn't scheme away. And that's when expectations quietly became heavier. Every late game after that came with an invisible demand: do it again. That's the trade-off of greatness no one warns you about. You don't get remembered for making the shot once, you get remembered for making it every time they expect you to. Rose never ran from that weight, he absorbed it. And nights like this were proof that the moment didn't own him, he owned the moment. But here's what makes this game more important than the highlight itself. It happened before the MVP, before the national commercials, before the injury conversations swallowed everything. This was Rose announcing the part of his personality that wouldn't disappear even when his body betrayed him later. Confidence without arrogance, fearlessness without recklessness, control without flash. Those traits don't vanish with athleticism, they're embedded. And that's why when people talk about Derrick Rose today, they don't just talk about what he was, they talk about what he felt like to play against. Because if you were on the other side of that floor in March 2011, you knew something uncomfortable. The game wasn't over just because the clock said it almost was. And that feeling stays with you.
By the time the buzzer sounded, the shot had already done its job. Not just on the scoreboard, but on everyone watching. Because moments like this don't live in isolation. They ripple forward. They follow a player into future possessions, future seasons, future reputations. And this one quietly stamped something permanent onto Derrick Rose's career long before the league fully caught up. What this game did was simple but dangerous. It removed doubt. Not from fans. Fans are emotional, reactionary. But from the people who matter most in a player's arc: teammates, coaches, and opponents. The people who make decisions in real time, the people who remember. After this, when Chicago needed a basket late, there was no debate in the huddle, no long discussion about options, no "if this breaks down, then maybe." The ball was going to Rose. And more importantly, everyone in the building knew it. That's the moment a player crosses an invisible line, when predictability doesn't weaken him, it strengthens him. When defenders know exactly what's coming and still can't stop it. That's when you stop being a young star and start becoming a problem. What made Rose different wasn't just that he took the shot, it was how little the moment changed him. His expression barely shifted, no chest pounding, no theatrics, just a quick turn, a release, and a calm walk-away, like this was simply the natural outcome. That's unsettling for opponents, because energy can be countered, emotion can be baited, ego can be exploited, but calm certainty, that's harder to disrupt. And this game planted the idea that Derrick Rose wasn't playing for the highlight, he was playing for control. Control of tempo, control of trust, control of the end. That season, Chicago kept finding itself in close games, and every time, the Raptors moment echoed quietly in the background. Because now, late-game possessions felt different. The Bulls weren't scrambling, they weren't panicking, they were waiting. Waiting for the window, waiting for the defense to blink, waiting for Rose to decide. And that decision-making,
That split-second judgment is what separated him from dozens of explosive guards who came and went. Plenty of players could jump higher or move faster. Few could slow the game down when everything screamed to speed up. This was the season where Rose's leadership stopped being about words and became about gravity. Defenders shaded toward him earlier. Help defenders cheated one step closer than they wanted to. Passing lanes opened not because he forced them, but because opponents feared what would happen if they didn't. That fear doesn't show up on stat sheets, but it wins games and it builds reputations. Looking back now, this buzzer beater feels like a quiet chapter, overshadowed by MVP conversations, playoff wars, and eventually injuries. But at the time, it mattered deeply because it showed something before the league tried to define Rose for him, before narratives took over, before people started asking how long his body would hold up. This was Derrick Rose telling the NBA who he already was: a closer, a finisher, a player who didn't need chaos to thrive, but could survive it if necessary. And maybe that's why this moment still resonates, because even after everything that followed, the surgeries, the setbacks, the doubts, the one thing that never disappeared was this part of him, the part that believed the ball belonged in his hands when the game was on the line. That belief didn't come from awards, it didn't come from hype, it came from nights like this, quiet, tense, unforgiving moments where hesitation meant failure, and Rose never hesitated. This buzzer beater wasn't about Toronto. It wasn't even about the win. It was about the early construction of a mentality that would define an era of Bulls basketball and leave a permanent mark on how Derrick Rose is remembered, not just as an MVP, not just as a what if, but as someone who, when time was running out and the pressure was highest, wanted the responsibility and proved he could carry it. And that's why this moment still matters. Because long before the world tried to rewrite Derrick Rose's story, he had already written this part himself, one possession, one decision, one fearless release at a time.